Welcome to CPC's Candidate Forum. I'm your host, Cole Cusick. Today, State Representative Marianne Proctor joins us regarding her re-election bid to represent Kentucky House District 60. In May of 2024, she defeated her challenger in the primary by a wide margin of 53 percentage points. Her Democrat opponent was invited to participate in a forum, but she did not respond. Lastly, House District 60 covers the southern portion of Boone County, mainly the city of Union. Representative Proctor, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to see you and be back with you today.
Great. I know we had a lively forum back in the primary. Unfortunately, your primary opponent was scheduled to attend, and that was going to be a back and forth conversation, but he chose not to show up either. But we did have a great conversation with CPC Executive Director Richard Nelson discussing a variety of issues. You can always go back to our Facebook and watch that interview if you would like. But Representative Proctor, to start out, why are you running for office again?
That's a great question. I'm running again because I didn't accomplish all the things I wanted to do in my first term. Certainly, my legislative priorities have been to repeal certificate of need to allow people more choices in healthcare providers and make it more affordable, improve quality, and improve accessibility. And then lately, it's really come to mind the issue that we're having with squatters that are beginning to take over in Kentucky and taking over property rights. So my constitutional duties are to fight for life, liberty, and property, and those are the things I want to continue to do.
Yeah, and I think your voters in the primary showed that they approved of the job that you did just in the few short years that you've been in office. Even going back 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when you first ran for office in the primary, you defeated a well-established incumbent, and then you were reelected in the primary. And I know that you have a big general election coming up. Your opponent was endorsed by a gun control group. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Everytown for Gun Safety Action. And according to their website, their group calls for a ban on assault style weapons. Now, your website outlines your position on Second Amendment rights, but is this something that you could support, an assault rifle ban?
I would not. I think that we need to be really careful about what our Constitution says. And the Second Amendment is very clear that those rights shall not be infringed. So, gun grabs or banning various weapons, I believe, lies outside of what our Constitution outlines.
Yeah, and another big portion of their website, which I know where you stand on it, but I would love for you to talk to the voters about it, which is red flag gun laws. I know Republicans have been on board with Democrats to push through legislation that would allow for somebody to contact law enforcement if they see that there could be a potential violent situation if there is a gun owner. Does that seem like a reasonable position to have if you're for the Second Amendment as well, or what are your problems with red flag gun laws in Kentucky?
What can make it sound so good? We're getting guns out of dangerous people, right? But again, we're infringing on our Second Amendment. And we've seen the abuses of our government. We've seen government overreach. Just even last week in our own state, we've seen government overreach. So I'm not confident in a system like that where you have citizens basically tattletaling on somebody, and it could be retaliatory against somebody, it could be vindictive against somebody, and then take away their constitutional rights. Red flag laws are a slippery slope, and I am adamantly opposed to them.
Yeah, thank you. Another big part on the ballot this year is going to be Amendment 2. And that amendment, if you vote yes on it, will change the Kentucky Constitution, if passed, to allow for educational opportunity programs to be enacted by the Kentucky legislature, yourself included. Where do you stand on Amendment 2 and school choice if this amendment does pass?
Well, I'm for what the people want. And the things I've heard overwhelmingly in my district is that people are wanting school choice. I myself am a believer in it. I believe that competition always raises all ships. If we have competition, it'll allow a better educational system and strengthen our education. I believe parents know best the type of environment and the type of teaching that their children need. And public schools are not a one size fits all. I would love for our public schools to be the best that they can be, and I will support them to be that. But I believe that there needs to be choice. Certainly, we need to catch up with the rest of the United States, being only one of two states in the entire 50 that does not have any form of school choice are leaving some of our kids behind. And I would certainly advocate for this amendment and for it to pass so that we can craft reasonable legislation to allow educational opportunities for our children.
Yeah, I know education is always a hot topic at the state legislature, and it's very clear in this race, I know, and all the races around the state of where you're going to land on educational opportunities and school choice. And I know you've been an advocate for that. A lot of the same arguments being made for not allowing choice in education are being made on the healthcare front as well. Over the past couple of years, you've introduced legislation to reform certificate of need laws in Kentucky. Now, there's a process where a new healthcare provider, if they want to open up shop in Kentucky, they have to go through a process with the state to prove that there is a need for their services in a community. Unfortunately, in Northern Kentucky, we've seen a new provider attempt to come in, but the dominant provider sued so that they could not come in, and they won that case. That did not allow new options for healthcare patients in Northern Kentucky. I know you have a background in healthcare and you've introduced these bills and that you support certificate of need reform. But what do you have to say to those individuals who say certificate of need reform would shut down rural hospitals? It wouldn't increase quality of care for individuals in a certain area. What do you have to say to those detractors?
Well, I would say that they're blind to the data. All the data that has come out specifically to Kentucky has shown that rural areas are more impacted negatively by certificate of need. There was a report that came out just a couple weeks ago that was saying we have 17 hospitals in Kentucky right now, rural hospitals, that are in danger of closing, six in imminent danger in rural Kentucky, and that's with certificate of need in place. Certificate of need is not saving rural hospital. It is not giving any of the things it said it would do. And we're falling further and further behind. In 2013, the General Assembly was tasked to look at the health facilities capacity report. And in 2013, Kentucky was deemed to be deficient in many services, including ambulances, ambulatory surgical centers, mental health, chemical dependency, home health, hospice, just to name a few. But due to outside pressures, the General Assembly failed to act. And here we are in 2024, and all of those uh, specific industries still are regulated by certificate of need, as well as almost over 30 other services and technologies that are not able to come into Kentucky without this arduous, lengthy legal process of the certificate of need.
Yeah, and even on top of that, healthcare is a major issue for many families. The cost of it, the access to it, unfortunately, has declined. And prices have increased, the quality has decreased, waiting times. What are some other things other than certificate of need reform? Over your years of experience in the industry, what are some other things that can be done to help younger families, families still having to pay out of pocket costs? What are some things you can see that can be done through the state level or even federal level to help families?
Well, I gotta stay in my lane. As far as federal level, I don't get into that. I'm only a state representative, but I think there's systemic problems with our funding. Is a lot of the problem and how we fund hospitals. Insurance regulations, and that has become so expensive for the middle class families because there definitely are cost shifting over to families to make up for where we're hospitals are not getting adequately reimbursed from Medicare or Medicaid. It's a problem. It really demands a complete overhaul. But what is happening is we're creating a further class of the have and have nots. So what's happening, people that want good health care and can afford it are going to physicians that are doing boutique services that provide services to patients who can afford to pay cash, and is leaving the people who can't behind. Competition will always help solve this problem. Hospital transparency and billing always helps these problems to allow people to see where they're being charged. Is it cheaper to go somewhere else to get an MRI? Is it cheaper to go somewhere else to get various services? Unfortunately, we don't have that. And when you only have one healthcare system, your only option, certainly for those in as of Northern Kentucky, is to cross the river and go into Ohio or go over into Indiana. My concern for that is that Medicaid does not cross state lines. So our children aren't able to get the services, and it's particularly at crisis level right now for mental health. I've heard from healthcare providers in Ohio saying we're getting most of our referrals from Kentucky, but we can't take them. For others who have insurance, if they go across the river, they may be out of network or it may not transfer over. So we've got to overhaul our entire system, from our payment system to the types of services we provide and the quality of care that we provide.
No, those are all really good points. I know seems like a huge issue, but I'm glad that you're attempting to make some type of headway in it in the state legislature.
Kentucky is at a crossroads. We can choose to give in to the radical left, or we can choose to engage the culture in a God-honoring way.
I started the Commonwealth Policy Center because I believe that Christians have a responsibility to influence government and society to the glory of God. While the Commonwealth Policy Center's made a significant impact, our work isn't finished. If you'd like to join our movement working for timeless values, then head to our website.
To learn more, go to commonwealthpolicycenter.org.
But if you're just tuning in, we're interviewing Republican candidate for office, Representative Marianne Proctor, in our candidate forum for House District 60. You allude to a couple things in the last thing you said, which is about spending. Uh, I know that Medicaid is a large portion of the state budget. But what we see oftentimes is it's not always the taxes that come in. Spending is a very large issue. Over the past couple of years, the state legislature has chosen to lower the state income tax because we've met some benchmarks, and it's been lowering, I believe, most recently now to 3.5%. But how do you balance wanting to lower the state income tax and the resources the state brings in versus the budget and the line items that are continuing to increase on a yearly basis?
Well, that's one of my biggest concerns. I certainly am for cutting our taxes. It is our money. It's not the government's money. It comes out of our pockets. And I think we are constituted to be good stewards of the money that we receive from the people. So I'm an advocate of continued to cut taxes, certainly the personal income tax, make Kentucky competitive with employers and be an attractive place to want to work where you are able to keep your money and not be penalized for being a producer. And I would say there's a lot of pork in our budget that we can cut. We don't need to raise more taxes to offset. I'm not into offsetting. I'll give you tax cut here, but we're going to tax you here. I'm not for that. I would say, what have we cut? And I'm relatively new to all the budgeting. This was my first budget year, and I looked at that. Boy, there's some things in there. I'm wondering if we really need to be spending that way. So I would say we could lean it up where we spend on some things and be better stewards with our money, continue to give people their money. It is the people's money.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think when people start saying it's public dollars, yes, it's public dollars, but it's your tax dollars that you provide towards the state to give you the services back that you've provided. And many times they just believe it's a free for all on that money. And how have you dealt with the lobbying arm in Kentucky when it seems like every industry wants a handout or a credit, or they want to eliminate competition in their industry? How have you handled that balance when people come to your office, industries asking for certain handouts?
Well, I'm opposed to any kind of corporate welfare, so it usually ends there. Now, I'm willing to listen to lobbyists to what they have to say. I think there's a lot that I can learn. I love to learn all sides of an argument, but my initial reaction is I'm not into corporate welfare. I think we as individuals, we have to be responsible for our own budget. We have to really evaluate our wants and needs and live within that if we are going to be responsible with our money. I think the state needs to do the same, regardless of what it is. And again, go back to what are we constitutionally required to fund? We need to do infrastructure. We are required to pay for our schools and services like that. I'm not sure we're required to do all the services, the wants that people want, and just keeping that real clear.
Yeah, very good. Your opponent was recently endorsed by Planned Parenthood for her stance on abortion, but your website states, I stand unapologetically as a pro-life advocate. Why are you pro-life, and what does that mean to you?
I'm pro-life, and there's a lot of things that inform that, but certainly my biblical beliefs. I believe that it's not even my belief. I mean, science shows life begins at conception. For me, life is from conception to natural death. I've had a long history of working with children. For my husband and I have had foster kids. As a speech pathologist, I've worked with kids. I've always been involved in youth groups. Children are very important to me. The family is important to me. I believe every life is created in the image of God and has value. And to diminish that diminishes the very fabric and the core of our society. So I will always stand for life because I believe firmly that every life matters.
Yeah. No, I think that's a key distinction between you and your opponent. There couldn't be more of a difference between. Were you endorsed by Kentucky Right to Life this last time around?
I was.
Yeah, a difference between Right to Life and a Planned Parenthood endorsement. There's a big push now in the Kentucky legislature. There was one last session and now in the interim with not allowing diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) offices to be at our public institutions. Where do you stand on DEI, and do you think it's effective in doing what it says it tries to do?
Well, again, we don't have to look any further than the data that we've been given. All the things that DEI were intended to do, increase underrepresented populations at the universities, has failed miserably. But yet, what we've done is we've hemorrhaged all this money into all these academic levels and reporting, microaggressions and all these things, and we've lost academics. I'm not sure it's the part of the university to do that. The equity is the biggest problem for me. We are all equal, but equity wants to ensure equal outcomes, and we just can't do that. I am a competitive marathon runner, but I have never won. I've never won one time. So is it because that the races are inherently, you know, they're inequitable? Or is it maybe my skill, my talent level isn't what it needs to win? And I feel like we're trying to do that with every position. We've lost meritocracy. I believe that we should be based on our merit, how to strive to succeed. And yes, some people have more obstacles to overcome than others, but to say that you can't is the very antithesis of the American dream, the very much of you work hard, you can progress. And I still believe in that. I am a product of that. And I wish that we would get rid of these. It's very expensive. I believe UK spent something like $10.5 million last year in DEI initiatives. I just think that we could spend the money a lot better and quit dividing us by classes, quit dividing the groups of people, and recognize more of what we have the commonality, and not just continue to divide us. It's not beneficial, and I don't think it's got us where we wanted to be as a more unified society. Actually, I would say it's quite the opposite.
Yeah, I agree. I think our society is ready to move forward and to provide hope and future and and to allow things to calm down. Unfortunately, many politicians at the federal level and members of the media do not desire things to move forward in the way that I know many Americans are wanting things to move forward. One of the last questions I will provide to you, Representative Proctor. A few years ago, in your first legislative session, a bill came forward, which was Senate Bill 150. It did a lot of things. It did not allow for minors to be prescribed puberty blockers and cross sex hormones. It stopped gender transition hormones. It made sure that the bathrooms and locker rooms at public schools were only for the biological sexes that they were prescribed to, so no boys in the girls' restrooms. It curtailed curriculums on LGBT ideology from being in the classrooms and provided more parental rights when it comes to what do you want your child to participate in a public school. Now, that was a very hard fought battle. Where did you come down on that issue? And where do you see Kentucky moving forward in the future on that issue?
It wasn't hard for me. That was an easy yes for Senate Bill 150. I am puzzled why there's such a push to confuse children and to do such irreversible harm to them as the irreversible hormones that they give them and the gender reassignment surgeries, and really confusing the boys and girls, and diminishing Title IX and the women's events. I don't know why there's such a push to want to have the boys in the girls' bathrooms, and uh, what's to me that's just so depraved at so many levels. I don't understand why there's a push for that. So that was easy for me on Senate Bill 150 to support that. I know that we may need to go back and strengthen that a little bit. Much to my disappointment, I've heard some schools are going around some of those measures that we did, certainly with bathrooms, with curricula, flags that they're putting in the classrooms. It's the parents' job to touch on those social issues. It is the teacher's job to teach our children in the academics and math, reading and science and English, and to be able to focus on that versus all these extra things that really are family issues and need to be dealt at home with the families.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a big issue we had worked on at Commonwealth Policy Center, and I thank you for standing up and taking that vote in the midst of what was going on in our state capitol. But I wanted to provide one more minute for you, Representative Proctor, to tell the voters of your district why they should reelect you to represent your district.
Well, I believe that I have the ear of the people in my district. And I have in my whole career as a speech pathologist, I have been the voice for those who don't have one. And in my role as a state representative is to continue to do that, to be the voice for my people, representing the values of the 60th district of Union and portions of Florence, to continue to bring to the State House legislation that better improves their lives, that gets government out of their business and allows them to flourish and do what they want to do without over regulation and intrusion into their lives. So my work isn't done. I'm still going to continue work on certificate of need. And my next thing is really protecting us against the squatters. And that again, all these are constituent driven issues. Everything that has gone from my desk to be filed, whether it's transfer on death of benefits or these other issues, are coming from the constituents because that's what they're asking. And so I want to continue to be their voice in Frankfort, to stand firm for their values and for their things that they're asking me to do.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Representative Proctor, and all those who chose to watch CPC's Candidate Forum of House District 60. Election Day is November 5th. Please get out and vote, and I hope you have a great day.